Greetings pilots, I'm Shaolin Rogue and thank you for joining me for another episode of my super fast, super cheap hangar upgrading guide. Welcome to episode 6, we're at level 27 with 4 slots, nearly all of our bots and weapons are at level 7, and we're on the verge of moving from Silver League 3 to Silver League 2. If you're joining us for the first time, episodes 1 to 5 outline growing your hangar to top tier competitive status, while investing as few resources as possible and maximizing the rewards available to new players as they make their way to level 30. It's finally time to trade up our trusty chutes for another permanent addition to our hangar, and now that we have a set of plasma for one of our Griffins, the next workshop point purchase will be the fearsome Carnage. Our 2 retired chutes will provide us with a pair of Thunders already at level 7, and the Thunder Carnage will make an excellent addition, being not only lethal at close range, but its mid-range utility increases as you encounter larger robots and energy shields. All 4 of our slots are now filled with top-tier viable builds that are worth investing the silver into level while we continue to bank workshop points and gold. Having both the Tulumbus Pin Griffin and the Molot Griffin in our hangar at the same time makes us mid-range heavy, however I feel these have been our best choices up to this point, and even with the new rocket reload mechanics, I'm having a hard time picking between the 2. It's time to see our new lineup in action. I'll join you back in the hangar after the footage to review our options moving forward on the long road to our 5th slot. definitely seem to be able to hold our own despite being surrounded by much more expensive hangars. This is a well-rounded setup with rockets for splash damage, plasma weapons, point-blank DPS, and Molots allow us to counter other mid-range weapons from a safe distance. What I recommend you do next depends mostly on how frequently you play. If you're a more active player, you may want to save all of your gold for your 5th slot first before looking at purchasing any gold weapons. By the time you have your 5th slot, you should have enough workshop points saved up for a 5th set of weapons and a robot of your choosing. I will be saving up workshop points for a 2nd Carnage armed with tridents, none of which will cost any gold at all. I personally feel that the Carnage is on par with a Fury, making up for the reduced damage with its shield and speed, while also being a lot more fun to play. Another set of plasma for a Griffin or a Rhino is another solid option, but what's important is that you build a hangar that's full of robots that you enjoy playing. If you're a more casual player with limited playtime, you may want to invest first in a pair of Orkans. The road to the 5th slot is extra long in real time for casual players, and outfitting one of the mid-range Griffins with Pinatas and Orkans will not only round out the hangar, increase our damage output, but will also give us another top tier build that is effective and fun. Since this is a secondary account for me, it's the category I fall into, and I've gone with Orkans first before saving for my 5th slot. With new robots and weapons on the horizon, it remains to be seen if the Griffin will remain a dominant presence in top tiers, but I'm sure it will always be one of the best options to enable you to be effective while conserving your resources for larger purchases down the road. We have 2 more action-packed matches featuring the latest hangar for you to enjoy. I'm Shaolin Rogue, thanks for watching, and until next time, good hunting.
Let's